Absolutely. It's a bit of a mixed bag for the government because, on the one hand, of course, higher interest rates will hopefully bring down inflation, which should lessen the cost of living crisis a bit. But the government is very, very worried about people's mortgage rates soaring. And, of course, as you point out, interest rates are still low by historic standards. But the difference between now and sort of 30 years ago is that because low interest rates have been bedded into our economy for so long, stress tests on mortgages, for example, are much less rigorous than they used to be. So whereas 30 years ago someone could borrow about 3 times their salary, 3.5 times their salary, because interest rates were higher and the banks were worried that once the interest rates was factored in, people wouldn't be able to pay back those repayments. Now people are borrowing sort of 5 times their salary, which means when interest rates go up, they're not able to pay their mortgages.
People are much more over-leveraged and have borrowed incredible amounts of money, meaning even a little difference in interest rates now would be the equivalent of a massive difference in interest rates back then.
Exactly. And the problem for Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt is, against that backdrop, they're planning to impose new tax rises on the UK, and one that's being talked about quite a lot is freezing the rate at which people start paying the higher rate of income tax, freezing it at, I've got an exact figure, but if they do that, then it works out as a stealth tax rise, because against a backdrop of very, very high inflation, freezing that rate will mean that all sorts of people, teachers, civil servants, nurses, get pulled into the higher rate of income tax, which isn't what the higher rate was there for in the first place. Add that to an average of £84 extra per month for those on variable rate and tracker rate mortgages. People are going to be in a very sticky situation this winter.
Very difficult for the government to navigate, I suppose. But looking to that overall fiscal statement, that autumn statement, as we're supposed to now call it, a proper budget in the way that the mini-budget wasn't. I suppose we were going to expect the Chancellor to walk out of Number 11 holding his red briefcase aloft, as we normally do on these situations. But what do we expect can the government do to sweeten what is going to be a pretty bitter pill?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to see what sort of wiggle room they've got. I think we can assume that that £50 billion figure we're hearing all the time, the idea that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are going to fill it in with £25 billion of tax rises and £25 billion of public spending cuts, is probably a bit of an exaggeration. I think Jeremy Hunt is in sort of expectation management mode, and perhaps some of the threatened tax rises and public sector cuts won't come through. I think one particular policy that they're talking up at the moment is only raising public sector pay by around 2%, when, of course, the unions are demanding that it's raised by more like 10%. That could be one that's sort of being threatened, and then when it gets to the actual budget, they decide to sweeten the pill, as you put it, by not going ahead with that.
Do you mean